So that's something to think about. Environmental deterioration happens in stages. Think about that. Hostile encounters tend to escalate predictably. So from vehicle contact to other things, and JJ is going to really go into that. So this was the time, if you're looking at the picture, to turn around, to calmly, don't call attention to yourself, make a left turn. Don't worry about, just do it safe. Don't worry about getting a ticket. That's okay if you get a ticket, because you can remove yourself from the environment. Your plan has to be better than their plan. And if you're thinking about it ahead of time, that's why you're having this great webinar seminar here. It's cognitive training. In other words, what am I going to do? I'm sure that JJ and Stephen and Sandy talk to you about firearms. Well, they give you a firearms plan, everything from grip to trigger to everything else. You need the same thing. Thanks, Sandy. That's enough. You need the same thing with soft skills. So the best one, remember this, the best defense is the one you don't have to use. Don't put yourself in that zone of danger. So that's an overview of soft skills. I guess at the end we'll have some questions, but that's my recommendation. Sandy?
Wayne, can we go a little bit deeper onto the photo? I'm going to put the photo back up, but
Okay.
could you tell us what are some of the key indicators that you see that we as the public should recognize? Let me go ahead and put that back up. There you go.
So one of the things that happens, and it's natural to have this, is normalcy bias. Our psychic doesn't allow us to think like these people on the corner. We don't know what they're going to do. And we're also curious. How many times in crime scenes do you see people just taking photographs? Look at every night there's a training film on television, and that's Minnesota or LA. Any of those riots are training films for you to see how quickly things deteriorate. So if I see this, I don't have to wonder what they're doing. I wonder who those guys are. Time passes when you're thinking about that. When you see this, you should think, okay, I don't need to be involved in this. I'm going to make a U-turn and get out of here. Note the police cars at the right with their lights on. This is a problem getting ready to happen, and it could escalate at any time. So really, that's what it's about. Have that plan, get out of there. Don't be curious, not have normalcy bias. I think it's going to be okay. So maybe I can drive through. I live just right down the street. I'm going to go straight and I'm going to hope my car isn't attacked or I get a brick or something like that. Don't become a victim. Avoid it. Sandy?
All right, thank you. In reference to some of that, I know that JJ is going to go into greater detail about some of the things that you can do, but thinking back on that photo, what are some immediate options? Like there's cars in the center of the street, there's people on the right-hand side. If I turn right, they're in my way. So what kind of things can I actually do at this point?
I see two options there, and none of them involve stopping. See if you can back up, see if you can make a J turn. I think this car could make a slow left and merge into traffic going the other way. But the point is the vehicle has to move in a slow fashion so you can control it. Remember, control outweighs speed. If you panic, that panic inputs, that degrades vehicle performance. So if you hit the gas, you're going to slide around and do a bunch of things. So and if you hit something, you might have that limp mode come in. This is really about preserving uh, survivability, not acceleration.
So let me ask you also, and I'm asking questions off the cuff, but as a woman driving or as an individual driving into this location, I may look at it and say, it's just a bunch of people hanging out, right? Or there's another side of me that in the pit of my stomach, I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel right, but should I react to that?
So the answer is trust your intuition. Women have better intuition than men. And I can tell you, talking to victims all these years, victims tell us, I had a funny feeling about that guy that was standing next to my car in the parking lot. I had a funny feeling, and I didn't want to seem like I was prejudiced or anything like that. And I didn't want to think that he was a bad guy because I'm a nice person. So I walked over to him and he hit me in the head and took my purse.
Mm.
So that's trust your instincts. So that's a slow left turn from that video.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Um, so let's assume you guys miss all the signs and now you're in a different position. And again, I'm sorry, guys. Bear with me as I train up to be a better producer here. All right. So you guys find yourself in this position now. And we're going to turn to JJ and ask him, you guys are in this car right here. What options do you really have?
All right, thank you, ma'am. Now, before we get to all the immediate actions for safety, let's take one step back, right? It's going to be a little bit about the soft skill, but think about it. If you live in the areas like big cities like LA, Long Beach, or North Orange County, Anaheim, Santa Ana, which we always see these type of events happening. Maybe down in South Orange County, that is much smaller, and you're not gonna deal with these type of situations. But in those bigger areas, if you are driving inside of town, you probably want to gather some data, right? Check news, social media, or they are gathering in these area. Try to avoid them, right? And now let's say all the soft skills fail, and now I'm right there in behind that signal light, or people are right in front of me, just like a picture you see there. Try to read your environment, okay? See the crowd. Is it a peaceful crowd? Maybe sometimes you have those, right? At that point, we don't need to take any actions. Just wait until they pass and they're done and you're good to go, right? You don't want to escalate the situation at that point. Now, if the situation becomes violent, now we're going to go over these immediate action safety measurements that we have. Now, first thing, securing your vehicle, right? The good thing is most of the vehicles, after you drive certain speeds, automatically lock the doors for you, right? You want to make sure all your windows are up, right? Even tiny gap that allows someone to put their fingers in there, get a good grip on your window. I don't know if you know that or not. With a very shocking move with both hands, you can break certain cars' windows, right? We do not want to give that opportunity to anyone. You want to make sure the windows are rolled up, all the way up, right? Of course, engine is running all the time, all right? And for extreme measurement, you want to turn off the ventilation system, making sure that when you press the button that there is no cycling air coming from outside inside the cabin. If they're using, in the crowd, they're using any type of gas or smoke, you don't want to have those come inside the cabin at that point. Second thing, like Mr. Wayne was talking about, your car is not cover or concealment. You are just kind of like inside that cabin right there. It's kind of like a box. You already limited to your movements. At that point, you want to have your seatbelts off. Gives you a little better mobility. Why? Think about it. If you have other people inside the car, let's say sitting in the back seat, passenger side, somehow they break the window. You want them to be able to create a little bit distance, go to the opposite side, and not become an easy target to get grab on and pull them out of the car, right? Create a distance. At that point, even you want to use any type of tool that you have for self-defense, you have a little bit distance, you have a little bit a better opportunity to do it. That's why you want them to have their seatbelts off. If you have other people with you, it's a good idea to have them to bring their head down, lay down a little bit. You have a better view of your surrounding. Plus, you don't want them to get injured and protect them. If there's opportunity, try to video the incident, right? These days, these cameras that you can buy, they're not that expensive. For front of your window, they can become very helpful if you get in any type of accident, road rage, or these type of situations. You're pretty much gathering evidence that later on, when you want to justify if you use any force, if you want to justify it, you have that evidence, right? You that recording video right in front of what's happening in front of you and right what's happening behind you, right? And recording whole incident at that point. Try to stay calm, right? Not making any type of eye contact. Try to read the environment. Try to see how you can get out of that situation, right? Don't get panic, right? Now, worst case scenario, if they break any window, right? And now you have to take actions. Now this is about surviving the situation. And every time you get to any type of self-defense situations, always expect to get injured, right? Level of injury is gonna be different, depends on your skill set, and also depends on who you're dealing with. You might gonna deal with someone who's experienced, okay, and then you're gonna have a bad day. Hopefully, you are also skilled, and you can survive that situation. Or you might gonna deal with someone that is not that experienced, and you have a higher chance of surviving with less injury or no injury, right? Now, if you're using tools like pepper spray, right? Like we said, creating a distance, deploying that pepper spray or pepper gel. You want to make sure you know how to use it. By just buying the pepper spray or pepper gel, having it inside the car doesn't mean you are expert in using it or you know how to use it. You have to practice it. There are practice ones that they have water in there and it's good for aiming. See how fast you can deploy it, right? And because if you deploy the pepper spray, now you're hitting inside the beeper inside your car, guess what? Now all that pepper spray is going to stay inside the cabin. You marinate yourself inside that cabin with that pepper spray. It's not going to be a good time. If you're using a stun gun, you need to have a direct contact with the subject. If you're using a taser, you need to make sure those darts are contacting the target. All these tools, there is no guarantee that they're always going to be effective. Even you spray someone, based on my experience working for agency, even you spray someone doesn't mean it always going to solve the problem. I had situations that I used a pepper spray, person stopped fighting with us and with me and my partners, and we had the situation that we sprayed the person. Actually, it made that person more angrier, right? And it turned to the next level of force. You have to understand that. Now, if you don't have anything, if you do not have anything, at that point, it's pretty much is a hands-on combat. I do not recommend throwing punches, especially if you don't know how to throw a punch. Even if you know how to throw a punch, remember, you're in a sitting position. You cannot generate that much force throwing punch because if you have experience, you know that. Generating force for punch requires entire your body, okay? Turning your body, your movement generates enough force for your punch. If you don't have that movement, you're not going to generate that much force, right? In my opinion, best thing is laying down on your back and using your legs and throwing kicks and making sure you're throwing very hard kicks, right? Don't just go rapid fire throwing kicks, and then you get yourself tired, right? And they can grab your leg. But make sure you're throwing very hard kicks when you have a target. And trying to just at that point, the driver try to find a way to maneuver. Now, if you have your firearm with you, you have your pistol, I really recommend avoid brandishing your weapon when you're trying to find a way driving through this crowd because you can create a very bad situation. You might become an imminent threat to those people at that point. Kind of similar case that happened back in 2020 in Austin, Texas, during the BLM protest, right? Garrett Foster versus Daniel Perry, right? Daniel Foster was open carrying the AK, part of the protest, and David Perry was a guy was delivering pizza, or sorry, working for Uber at that moment. And Foster approached the car, and Perry thought, "Oh, this guy's pointing a gun at me," and shot Foster through the window 5 times, hit him 4 times, right? And he got charged as murder right there in that case because witnesses said, "Oh no, he didn't point a gun at him." He said, "Oh, he pointed a gun at me." Now it was more facts to it, but we do not want to create those type of situations. And also remember, it doesn't matter what type of tool you're using, you have to be able to justify that use of force. Doesn't matter using your fist, using pepper spray, pepper gel, stun gun, your vehicle, you have to be able to articulate that situation. if you get trapped, they already surrounded your car, call 911, try to report it, right? Now, these are the immediate actions you want to take. Now, our goal is to get out of there as soon as possible, okay? Now, Miss Sandy, would you please bring that picture up for us?
The picture or the video?
The video, sorry about that.
You got it.
Yes. Right here. If you look at bottom right, you see that white Prius right there. Okay. If you are in that situation and you feel like, okay, I'm trapped right here, what can we do? Now, before I go further, I just want to say I do not want to under quarterback that driver's actions, right? Everybody reacts to situations different way. Depends on your mental and physical condition, right? But in this situation, you got to see, where can I go? Now, if you look at the right side of that Prius, there's another car right there, okay? It's going to make it a little bit challenging to make a right turn. But do I have opportunity to put the car in the reverse and go back a little bit, make a right turn? Like Mr. Wayne was talking about, at that moment, I do not care if I get a ticket. And I don't think in any state, cops going to give you any ticket for saving yourself from this type of crowd, okay? We're not worried about it. Now, even if I hit any car in this process, I'm not gonna stop trying to exchange info. No, we just moving on. And in entire of this type of situations, you also don't want to get out of the car, try to negotiate or reason with these people, because at that point, as soon as you open the door, you're giving them access inside the car and to you and your family. All right. Again, if I can put the car in reverse, get back a little bit, make a sharp right turn, we're going to do that right away. If I don't have the luxury to do it, right after that car, you see not that much crowd are there. Can I make a right turn? Maybe. If I cannot, look a little bit further that way. You have a sidewalk. Okay. Can I go to sidewalk? Believe me, if I need to save myself, my family, I'm going to get to that sidewalk. And now question is how I'm going to drive. You do not want to panic drive. You want to avoid erratic or rapid or high speed driving, guys. Okay. You want to make sure that you slowly, kind of like gently, nodding, find your way to the area that you wanted. Slowly and slowly, right? You do not want to stop at any point, because you are giving them opportunity to surround your car more and come up with either ideas what they can do to your car or to yourself, damage your car, for example. You always want to keep the car in some movement. Even it's slow, it's all right, but keep the car moving at that point. Now, even if your sidewalk is not available, look right in front of that car. Not that much a crowd, right? Try to work your way through that crowd and try to move the steering wheel to the left and right to make sure, change the directions. Then these people, they're going to move their directions with you at the same time. It's going to be hard to stop your car at that point for them, right? Again, we are not stopping our cars at any time. And Sandy, would you please play the video a little bit? Here you go. This car had the opportunity to pass this crowd and drive away. Now, as soon as I get this opportunity right here, I'm not driving this slow. I am putting the hazard lights on. I am driving fast, leaving this area as soon as possible. We are not driving that speed. We are driving very fast. Now, in this situation, unfortunately, there is a car is chasing this vehicle. And at one point, he's going to go box him and stop him. Okay, if we can pause it right here for me. Now, I'm not going to stop my car for anyone if it's not a law, besides the law enforcement. If this car try to block me, stop me right there, guess what? I'm going to create distance. I'm going to move from the right side or left side. I do not going to try to talk to these people to leave me alone. None of those stuff, right? I'm just, if I have to put the reverse, I'm going to put the reverse immediately, move from the right side or the left side. Please play. And if you look, for whatever reason, the window is down here. And this is the first wrong thing. You're giving access to inside your car, right? The window shouldn't be down. And you shouldn't be stopping. right? You should be moving. At this point, car should be in the drive and moving forward. You might gonna say, JJ, well, I'm gonna drag this guy with me. Okay, you're going to drag that person with you at that point, right? You're not gonna wait. Don't pause. Keep driving. You might gonna take a couple of hits to your face. Believe me, keep your chin down, protect your jaw. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna get some bruises, and you're gonna be fine. Look, now speed is a little bit faster, right? That should be done in the first place. Again, expect some injuries at these type of situations because that's not a normal situation. Now, there are much more things we can go over it, but because of time, I have to give it back to you, man.
All right. Thank you, JJ. Now that we've seen what can happen in a moment's notice, let's talk about the legal components to the nightmare that's about to follow. Stephen?
All right. Well, thank you, Sandy. All right. So, one of the things that a lot of people naturally assume are that the police are going to immediately identify them as being the good guy, that they are, in fact, the victims. And oftentimes, in a situation that's very fluid like this, police are simply not in a position to be able to gather all of the facts. What they do are empowered to do is act as peace officers and attempt to keep the peace. The judicial system, an entirely separate branch of government, is empowered to ultimately act as a trier of fact and make a decision as to who, in fact, is criminally culpable in this instance. There are a lot of people, and most of you have met me before, and you're familiar with a phrase that I oftentimes use called pathologically law-abiding citizens. Most of us are just that. We're pathologically law-abiding. And as a result, we believe that we are going to garner support from the state. After all, we're the good guys, right? That's the way it works. And yet it doesn't always manifest that way. The reality is that the way our system of government is set up, many times prosecutors are elected by the constituents of the people that they serve. And as in almost every single election, money plays a huge role in getting certain people elected to these certain positions. And as a result of that, there's oftentimes an ideological component that attaches to this. So one of the things that I oftentimes say to my pathologically law-abiding citizens is that you are, in fact, being deployed into a morally ambiguous environment. This is a perfect example. If this situation were to manifest not in Los Angeles, but in Orange County, or where Wayne lives in Florida, there is a very, very strong likelihood that a prosecutor would elect not to file charges against the person driving the vehicle. Conversely, if this is an incident that's taking place in a jurisdiction where you have a district attorney that's been supported by an ideological component that is looking to be disruptive to the status quo and to the system, think of George Soros prosecutors as a classic example, then the DA may elect to file charges against the individual driving the car. So the exact same fact pattern in one zip code is going to result in somebody potentially having a criminal complaint filed against them, while in an entirely different zip code, they're going to be left scot-free. It's impossible to make that determination. It's very difficult, especially in an area like California, pardon me, where you're transitioning between multiple jurisdictions, oftentimes in the same day. To be able to be in a place where you can sit there and say, well, I'm never going to find myself in this location, so I can comport myself in this particular behavioral context. It simply doesn't work that way. We have to understand that we must provide some level of protection for ourselves. I oftentimes like to say, the law is not a suicide pact. All right. Ultimately speaking, you have to survive. Now, in the event that you do end up having a criminal complaint filed against you as a result of these actions, your criminal defense attorney is going to initiate with what we call an affirmative defense. They are going to be telling the district attorney that we are not going to be arguing about the facts of the case. Essentially, there are no triable issue of facts. We may differ as to whether or not the actions of the individual were reasonable under the circumstances, but there is no question as to whether or not this isn't a whodunit type case. All right. There was an individual caught on camera driving a vehicle being chased down by a group of people in a pickup truck that ultimately resulted in some level of force being used against them. And they used their vehicle as a weapon. Let's throwing some facts in that aren't necessarily in evidence, but use their vehicle as a weapon to push some of these people out of the way and then continue to move on. Because had they chosen instead to simply stay put, the inevitable result would have been death or great bodily injury. And again, as many of you have listened to my lectures before in the past, you should know that you are allowed to use deadly force. And using a vehicle against a pedestrian is, by definition, a form of deadly force. You are allowed to use deadly force when it is objectively reasonable to believe that there is an imminent likelihood of death or great bodily injury. Well, when we look at that video, we can say that a reasonable person would objectively believe that but for the application of force, the driver would have suffered death or great bodily injury. Now, sadly, there are prosecutors that will essentially ignore this. We've talked about this before. We had a case in Los Angeles, the same jurisdiction that this carjacking took place in, where we had a woman that was basically in the exact same predicament that the driver of the Prius in the video was in. She was chased down by 3 separate vehicles, and very similar again to the video, one of the assailants tried to reach into her vehicle and grab her and pull her from the car. She responded to this not by simply moving her vehicle out of the way. Based on the circumstances that her vehicle was in, she simply didn't have the ability to be able to back up or maneuver around. So since she was effectively boxed in, the only thing available to her was her gun. And that's exactly what she did. She shot the person that was attempting to extract her from the vehicle. In our mind, this was an absolutely reasonable use of deadly force given the circumstances. The district attorney in Los Angeles, who happened to be, it was Gascon at the time, which was a George Soros funded district attorney, took an entirely opposite position. He said, no, the use of force was unreasonable, and prosecuted our client for assault with a deadly weapon. Interestingly, I had brought in local counsel, and he was looking at the case and he said, I'm absolutely flummoxed here. I cannot understand what the DA is thinking. I mean, we are going to win this case. I mean, this is there is simply no jury that's going to convict. What is motivating the DA to file a criminal complaint? And I said, you know, what's interesting, his name is Bruce. I said, what's interesting, Bruce, is that had the client been able to drive her vehicle 7 miles further down the freeway into Orange County, Todd Spitzer, our district attorney, would be filing a criminal complaint against the people that were trying to drag her from the car. Instead, since she happens to be in Los Angeles, in that jurisdiction, under that particular district attorney, he decided to file charges against the client. Okay. Same fact pattern, entirely different result. All right. What you need to be able to understand is that at the moment that the event occurs, just like JJ mentioned, that if you use some level of force, you need to be prepared to understand that you are going to suffer some level of injury. That just has to be part of the mindset. Okay. Your goal is not to get out of this event unscathed. Your goal is to be able to survive this violent encounter. The same thing sort of goes when it comes to an interaction with law enforcement. Your goal is not to prevent yourself from being arrested that night. There is a 50-50 chance that you're going to be arrested. Now, part of that is not because the cops that happen to be responding to the scene are jerks, or they simply don't believe you, or anything along those lines. Oftentimes, their position is effectively policy generated. In any sort of violent encounter, their policy dictates that one party is going to the hospital and the other party is going to jail. Who the initial aggressor was is utterly irrelevant. That is something for the court system to ultimately decide. Their job is to simply clean up the streets and be able to get things moving as quickly as possible. So being arrested, while that's ultimately distasteful, there's no question about that, and nobody wants to go through the indignity of having to be taken to a jail and then have to bond your way out. But that is, from a criminal defense attorney's perspective, very low on our priority list. As one of my colleagues, Tom Givens, said, and I thought it was an absolutely brilliant analogy. The cops oftentimes are kind of like the triage. Okay, they're the ones that are at the scene making a quick snap-second decision to figure out how they're going to handle this and then turn it over to an entirely different division of law enforcement, the prosecutors, to decide whether or not to file charges and ultimately whether or not this is going to turn into an actual trial. Our job as lawyers is really almost like being surgeons in an operating room. That's the courtroom, okay? We're in the operating room, and now we do have time on our hands. We don't have to make necessarily instantaneous decisions, and we can get deep into the actual operation. We can plan it out. We can orchestrate it. We can decide what evidence is going to be used that's going to be able to protect the life of our client and what evidence might possibly have been gathered through, unconstitutional means and needs to be excluded from trial. We start going through all that level of esoteric analysis, but you can't do that in the middle of a violent encounter. It's functionally impossible. And, to a large extent for law enforcement, they don't have the luxury of being able to do that. Okay. So, like I said, and by the way, it is no guarantee that you're going to be arrested at the end of one of these things. As I've said before, I think probably only about 40% of my clients at the end of any sort of use of force event ultimately got arrested. All right, it's by no means a guarantee. It's oftentimes just based on the totality of the circumstances. Now, if you are charged with a felony and the district attorney decides to move forward with that felony, then there's going to be an arraignment. You are going to have to be present at that arraignment. That is where you would plead not guilty. And then it's going to be set for a preliminary hearing. Preliminary hearing is typically done 30 days after the arraignment. Now, I say typically because our law firm, tries to age cases as long as humanly possible. There's all sorts of strategic reasons associated with this, but we try to push this out as long as possible. Now, a preliminary hearing is only designed to determine whether or not there is probable cause to remand somebody over for trial. It is not the trial, but our firm, use it as a method to try to get essentially people's statements on the record. Most criminal defense attorneys will use the preliminary hearing as sort of almost like a pro forma exercise, because the reality is nobody ever wins a preliminary hearing. The government always wins a preliminary hearing. The case is always remanded to trial. But we use it as a way of getting somebody to testify on the stand, to articulate facts. And then if it does go to a trial, we can basically show that their facts have changed. They've made inconsistent statements. We use it as a means to potentially impeach witnesses. Now, as a practical matter, oftentimes at the end of a preliminary hearing, the government is finally made aware that their case is in fact very weak. And they will look to off-ramp the case. They'll look to come up with some sort of an agreement where the individual either is going to plead guilty or sometimes they simply dismiss the case out of hand. And we've had a lot of success with that. But we haven't even reached trial yet. We're just going through these pre-trial phases. And this is a very expensive proposition. Typically speaking, in people in California, I tell them that a preliminary hearing is going to cost you about $60,000 plus or minus. We haven't even reached trial. This is also one of the reasons why I am such a huge advocate for self-defense insurance. Self-defense insurance is usually not applicable for just general garden variety crimes. It's not some sort of, criminal prosecution insurance. It has to have a nexus to self-defense. In this particular case, in Los Angeles, I would not be surprised if the driver of that Prius was in fact charged with some form of a crime, most likely a felony, probably a 245 assault with a deadly weapon, and they went through the exact same process that I've just described. That in and of itself would have cost that individual, like I said, probably about $60,000. Most of us don't have that level of liquidity. If the driver of that Prius had had some form of self-defense insurance, that entire bill would have been paid for by the insurance company. So whether it's USCCA or CCW Safe or any of the other self-defense insurance companies that are out there, I highly, highly encourage you to make sure that you have that. Okay, it's extremely important. All right, with that, it brings us to about 6:45. And Sandy, I'll turn this back over to you, and you can start, peppering us with all sorts of questions. And hopefully you're going to ask me about Italian Renaissance art, my favorite subject.
No, not tonight, Stephen, not tonight.
Okay, all
But
right.
I'm sure there are some individuals in the audience that are dying to ask some questions, and they're popping up into the chat box, and I'll be happy to read them and answer them on their behalf or ask them on their behalf. But if you guys will go down and use your digital hand and raise them, and it'll get you in line, and we'll just kind of answer them as they go. The one thing I ask is if we could just stay on this topic. This topic is so complex that even with what we've talked about, there are so many different iterations of what ifs and how ifs and when and why and all that. If we could just stay on this topic, that would help us to end this fairly at a decent time. And there is a hard stop time because Wayne is actually going to appear on Fox News again this evening. So, guys, we need to be mindful of the time. So please be mindful of the questions and raise your digital hand. If you don't know where it's at, look at the bottom of your screen and under React, click on React, and you'll see the words raise hand, and it'll get you in line. Brian, you're up first.
Hey, good evening, everybody. My question is for Steve Lieberman. Do you
Yes.
advocate for maintaining a personal defensive skills training record like notes from this class or class completion certificates and maintaining that record with an attorney, whether that be a specific self-defense attorney or even your family attorney, to hold until it's needed in court? This is obviously to demonstrate in court what you knew before an incident took place. Thank you.
The answer to that is yes. I will be candid with you. Actually leaving it in sort of the repository of a pre-established attorney may not necessarily be utterly necessary. Not a bad idea, to tell you the God's honest truth. Nobody's ever actually taken me up on that offer, but I'm sure I could probably come up with a payment schedule, Brian, if you want to try to deposit that with me. But in all candor, I think it's actually critically important for people to maintain a training record. Now, that being said, not all training is equal. Okay. And that is where we sometimes get into the rub. Taking continual courses that are what I would suggest are, the tactical courses, hey, listen, I spent the weekend hanging out of a helicopter and shooting at moving vehicles while wearing my plate carrier vest. Yeah, I mean, look, I've done it. Unbelievably fun. I thoroughly enjoy doing it, but that is, for lack of a better term, fantasy camp. Okay. Look, I'm an attorney from Southern California. If I get to the point where I need the skill set to shoot at a moving vehicle out of a helicopter, society has completely collapsed. And I'm not concerned anymore about potentially interacting with the criminal justice system. Okay. So what you need to be doing is robust training, training that focuses on judgmental use of force, defensive tactics, things along those lines. And yes, maintaining a record of that is important. In fact, it's critically important. It should also be noted that simply going to the range on a regular basis, while again, that is enjoyable and that's fun, that is actually the definition of what we would call recreational shooting and bears very little resemblance to anything that would actually take place in a gunfight. So, yeah, I mean, I do it. Okay. I mean, I enjoy doing it. It's a form of therapy for me, but I wouldn't necessarily raise it to the level of training. You do need to be doing something, some form of judgmental use of force, some form of defensive tactics, and you need to be doing that with a second set of eyes on you. This isn't something that lends itself to self-study, perhaps per se. So I'm a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I thank you for the question.
Thank you, Stephen. Dee, you are up next.
Very much.
My favorite instructor, by the way. All right, good to see you, Dee.
Good to see you too. My question isn't for you, Stephen. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to JJ and Wayne. Either of you, maybe you could answer my question. When I teach concealed carry, I have so much crap to spew out now, and there's time requirement to all my requirements, mental health and legal and all that. And I want to do like half of my 8-hour class on trying to get people to put stories in their heads about what would they do if, and then change the situation. How much of that, I try to get them to do dry fire at home with that. How much do you think the average concealed carry person actually does that?
Probably none, depending on the instructor. But look, it's a great idea. What I tell our classes is, what's going to happen if you get involved in a shooting situation? What's the first thing? You're going to have all these physiological reactions. So if we have physiological discipline, that preserves options. And what I mean by that is, you get involved, and I've been in a few of them. First thing is your ears are killing you because you don't have the earmuffs on from the range. It feels like somebody's putting a knife in your ears. But here's what else happens. You hold your breath, you get an adrenaline dump, you lose peripheral, you only use peripheral vision, you have tunnel vision, right? There's a distortion of motor skills, right? So people that get in shootings can't usually call 911 for 20 or 30 minutes. So if you expect that, you train for that, and you tell yourself to be sure to breathe, then you're going to have a deliberate, rehearsed decision in survival. So yeah, you're right. I would talk to them about it. What happens in a shooting? I unfortunately got in one inside of my car, and I couldn't, which is why I have a hearing aid in my left ear, and I couldn't hear for a week, but it was like a butcher knife went in my ear. So you just have to plan for it. And if you plan for it, it's better off than not. So you're right.
You don't have to spend those critical seconds making decisions when you've already got the plan made.
Yep,
Right.
absolutely. Yep. And your dry fire advice is great. I mean, I can tell you that world champions like Robbie Latham and these guys dry fire 30 or 40 times a night. So it's great.
If I can jump in, consistency in your training is the key, right? At that point, when you talk about the skill set, right, hard skills, it means you have to put the time, continue that training. I always tell people here that I do not have a luxury to shoot live rounds that often. I have to make up that training somewhere, and I do it with my dry fire practice, right? And I tell people, yes, you have family, you have work to do, all those things. But if we can dedicate 10 to 20 minutes, right way to do your dry fire practice. Not every dry fire practice is the right dry fire practice. When you take classes with people like, I had the luxury to take the class with like Bob Vogel, fastest guy with the Glock in the world, right? When he explained how to do dry fire practice, and I just realized, oh, okay, I've been doing it wrong for many years. Now I have to correct everything, right? Then when you sit down with these grandmasters, then you realize, it's kind of like a sport, right? You have to do the things right and continue that training until your brain, your body starts adjusting. I always tell people where you want to measure yourself, in a group of trained or untrained people, right? Think about the ER nurses, right? At first, when you look at them, you're like, how you guys function under this much stress and you do
Yeah.
your job? That's impossible until you see that there's a training program. They do it constantly over and over. That's why their brain can function under that stress and they can do things. It was the same thing when I was in law enforcement. Again, training needs to be consistency in that training. That's the key. Talent is not that important. Dedication and consistency in that training is the key that always keeps a person ready for those situations.
Here, here.
Are
Thank
there,
you very much.
thank you, Dee.
Uh-huh.
All right, I see Mr. Bigelow has raised his hand.
Ah, Mr. Bigelow has put down the opium pipe and now he wants to ask a question. All right, what do we have, Mr. Bigelow?
Lord help us. In the message screen here on the side, I'd like to know under what, somebody else asked this question, but under what conditions do I have the right to drive away hitting protesters who are attacking my car and potentially getting in to attack me?
So I'll answer that from from a typical lawyer's perspective and say it depends, right? Okay. The fact of the matter is, just as JJ had said, one of the key things that you need to do is be able to articulate. So you probably have heard the phrase before that a lawyer, a good lawyer, will never put his client on the stand. You have no legal obligation to testify in your own defense. Well, generally speaking, I agree with that. When it comes to asserting an affirmative defense of self-defense, that almost always mandates that the defendant actually testify. They must articulate, they must be able to articulate what their perception was at that particular time. More importantly, whatever sort of evidence, like in this particular case, the video, whatever sort of evidence exists needs to be consistent with what their impression was. A reasonable person needs to look at this and think, yeah, I would have done the same thing, so to speak. So when we look at a group of protesters surrounding a vehicle, they are effectively operating, at least this would be the argument that I would be making, they are effectively operating as a single criminal enterprise. And that single criminal enterprise has as its ultimate goal your physical victimization. Therefore, if deadly force becomes an appropriate response in order to avoid X, then that's going to also translate to the people that are effectively blocking you in so that X can deliver the combative blows that he's trying to do. Where this becomes a little bit more problematic is when you have left that immediate threat and you now have the 5 bystanders that are standing 75 feet away from your vehicle and looking at you with complete astonishment as you plow them down. All right. And that may actually be considered an independent crime, completely unrelated to the 5 or 6 people that had originally boxed in your vehicle. So this does get parsed out pretty granularly as we're looking to see whether or not criminal culpability is going to attach to one versus the other. Now, interestingly, why I might not necessarily be able to articulate a reasonable self-defense argument for the 7 bystanders that were 75 meters away, I may be able to argue some form of diminished capacity because this individual was in the state of being victimized, because they were so utterly threatened and their cortisol levels were through the roof and everything else. They did not have the mens rea. They didn't have the intent to victimize these people. Whether or not that's successful remains to be seen. But usually when we get to that point, we're deeply involved in a criminal trial at that level.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
You know, Stephen, there's a saying that we have here in Florida. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And it goes like this: I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the issues today in law enforcement with all the litigation is that we see that law enforcement is hesitating using deadly force. We just see that all the time. So the whole beauty of the soft skills approach is soft skills prevent hard problems. And just
Mhm.
if everybody remembers that, what are we doing in the situation to begin with? And I can tell you in my work, and I've carried a gun every day for the last 40 some years, if we had a plan, like Steve Tarani, I do this all the time, we're protecting someone. If we have to go to gun, in other words, if we have to draw that gun, our plan has failed. We didn't have options. We didn't run it through. We didn't have A, B, and C plan that we could use. So that's something to think about. Remember, the side with the best plan wins.
I think I think you absolutely nailed it, and that's one of the things that I think is important. Look, we tend to be very, very totemistic when we think about the firearm. We think that the firearm sort of acts as sort of like the elixir, right? You know, if I have my gun, I'm armed, and if I don't have my gun, then by definition, I'm unarmed. And the law really doesn't look at it that way, right? The law looks at whatever tool you happen to use as being potentially a weapon, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a 2x4, a 9-iron, a broken beer bottle, or a firearm. Now, there are sometimes enhancements that come into play if you use a firearm from a criminal penalty standpoint, but we're looking at whether or not you were using a weapon, something that might not necessarily be defined under normal circumstances as a weapon, but if you were using a weapon for some sort of potentially illegal criminal activity. In this case, an automobile. Okay. And, if, just as you said, if we get to the point where we are using a weapon in order to protect us, that means that everything has failed along the way. We do not use our gun, we don't use our knife, we don't use our vehicle as the first line of defense. We use it, if it's going to be used as a weapon, as the last line of resistance.
Yeah.
That's the key.
We've got to get that out of our mind. Oh, am I going to be prosecuted? What am I going to do? Because that slows you down.
Yep.
It screws up your OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. That'll put you behind the curve. I say get that insurance and protect yourself and don't worry about getting sued. Just defend yourself. In some jurisdictions, Texas and where I am in Florida, if you shoot a bad guy, we'll give you an award. We're not going to prosecute you.
Oh, we
All
got to
right, guys.
move, Sandy. We got to
I hate
move.
to do this. I hate to do this, guys. We are 1 minute away from ending our program, but I know that JPIN ID has had their hand up for a second. Can you go ahead and ask away?
Yeah, thank you. And it's actually Jose,
Jose, thank
in
you.
North Idaho. I was a former California resident and a former ADI student, and I'm in the process of getting my non-resident concealed carry in California. And I feel like my biggest deficit right now, not training related, is more related to staying up to date with the current changes in the law in California. And where can I go for that resource? Because
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, for everybody, and it's totally free. Okay. Every single Tuesday, Pacific Standard Time at 4 p.m., I do what is referred to as office hours. My office hours during the first half hour, D is a regular participant, as is Mr. Bigelow when he's not with his opium pipe. But they join me and they know the first half hour I talk about whatever sort of major updates are taking place in Second Amendment jurisprudence, typically focusing on California, but I do obviously have to talk about national, cases as well. And then the second half hour of that course, I open it up to questions from everybody. And we tackle those questions. So, I mean, if you want to be current, and by the way, there are times, actually several times, where my students that are attending those office hours will actually be the ones that inform me of certain things that are taking place that I was just utterly unaware of. And then, I research it obviously, and we talk about it the following week. But honestly, that would be probably, in my mind, that would probably be one of the best ways of keeping yourself really current. If you're looking for more in-depth analysis, I do write a blog. It's a shameless plug for me, but I do write a blog every Wednesday It's on the ADI website. If you go onto our website, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see something that says "To a blog." Oftentimes I do write about Italian Renaissance art, but whenever there is, in fact, an important Second Amendment related issue, I write about it in that blog, and that blog is published every Wednesday.
All right,
So
guys, we do need to go.
I'm self-promoting.
I know, Stephen, and you're doing a great job. You're doing a fantastic job, but some of us need to go to bed. Some of us has to go back to work. Wayne is going to work today. Thank you, Jackson. Guys, as you can see, it took us over an hour to really talk about the what did we call it? Mobile defense, in reference to how to deal with getting out of a volatile situation when you guys are just driving around town, right? There's so many what ifs with this. The 2-day event in Costa Mesa in April, we're going to go deep onto things like this. We're going to talk about how to train your eyes, how to train your ears, trusting your instincts regarding people, objects, changes of the environment. These are all the things that we're going to talk about. Situational awareness is such a very difficult concept to explain to you in a 1-hour webinar. So we really want you guys to come to the April event. It's normally I think 8 hours, 16-hour program that Steve Tarani teaches. But I've asked him to shorten it and just do 6 hours of programming so that we can get the legal component there and the hard skills to talk about how you do things if you fail to recognize all the soft skills. So guys, join us. I'm going to put a link to the event, and I will send you a link tomorrow with the recording from this evening. Guys, thank you for being here. Thank you, Wayne, for joining us.
My
JJ,
pleasure.
Stephen, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Link. Maybe I'll get them before they all log off.
Well, we can send that out in the notes.
I will
on
send
the
it out
class,
as a follow-up. But yeah, I think we need to fire me as the technical director here.
No, you did a great job. You did a great job.
Help me
All
out,
right,
Cindy. Help me out, would you please, with him?
Mr. Bigelow is just sitting
Yeah,
there.
would
Why
you
does he
please?
always pick on me about opium?
Yes, I've heard lots and lots of stories.
And none
I don't
of
know
them
if I can help you.
He's incorrigible.
Yes.
So
I think my father-in-law is online with us tonight. Yes, he is. I could agree.
Wayne, just so you know, so Mr. Bigelow is a regular on my Tuesday meetings. And whenever we have any sort of litigation, like the upcoming case of USA versus Hameni, which for what God knows why the US